Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the Newman Crows Landing Unified School District School Board Association, School Board meeting today. May I please have everybody stand for the pledge? Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and welcome, students. It's nice to see students at our meeting. Public communication, agenda and non-agenda items. Any person wishing to comment on agenda and non-agenda items may do so. Please step to the podium and state your name. It would be appreciated if you would limit your comments to 3 minutes. California law prohibits the school board from taking action on any matter which is not on the posted agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the board. Per board policy BB 9323, individual speakers may be allowed 3 minutes to address the board on each agenda or non-agenda item. The board may limit the total time for public input on each item to 20 minutes. With board consent, the president may increase or decrease the time allowed for public presentation, depending on the topic and the number of persons wishing to be heard. The president may take a poll of speakers for or against a particular issue and may ask that additional persons speak only if they have something new to add. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the board? Okay, thank you. I would like an approval of a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Mr. Posey, would you like to?
So the first item on the information discussion item is the fall data report. Ms. Bencourt is going to give us a report on the Dibbles skills test that was administered and talk about our next steps.
Thank you. Good evening. Where's gonna? Tonight, I'd like to give you some information and review some data from our fall benchmark. So before we actually look at the data, just a few things to take into consideration. The data we are going to be presenting tonight was collected from August to about mid-September this year. At the time we collected the data, beginning of the year, students had not been in school in person since March 2019, approximately 15 months. The data we're going to share tonight identifies students for intervention or enrichment, differentiated instruction, and supports teachers in their instructional decision-making. What we're noticing across the district in all grade levels is data is very polarized. So you're going to see a lot of red and you're going to see a lot of green and blue. We usually have a good chunk of students who fall right in the middle, and we're not seeing that. So we're going to be looking at that. Data will be reviewed and has already been reviewed many times during PLCs at all the sites. And data should be actionable. Anything we look at data-wise, we should be able to take action on. And so action is going to be taken at the sites and at grade levels and in departments based on the data and student needs. We're looking forward to adding math data for the secondary. The next time I talk to you, we should have some of that data after we implement our first round of iReady diagnostic assessments. If you have, oh, there we go. I guess I have to go backwards. I said I didn't want to go backwards, but here I go. If you have any questions, just please stop me. And so the first set of data that we're going to look at is what we call our Dibbles dynamic indicators of basic early literacy skills. We just call it Dibbles. We've been giving this assessment for close to 10 years. It's a universal screener, and it identifies students who are at risk of not meeting their reading outcomes. And when we look at reading outcomes, we're talking about all the different skills that go into becoming a reader. This is probably the most important indicator we have for these students. It all happens right here. The success or failure of a student, a lot of times moving past third grade, is dependent on what we do in these primary grades in the area of reading. So if you're looking at the data, we call basically what we call the red students, are they're at risk. So anyone identified in the red are at high risk of not meeting their reading outcomes. If you're in the yellow, you have some risk of not meeting the outcomes. Green, you are on track to meet your reading outcomes. And blue, you're well above track. You're kind of in the top of your grade span for meeting your outcomes. If you notice, in our first grade, we have a lot of students who are in the red, 73%. Now, we need to look at that and think about where those students were their first year in kindergarten. They were not in person. They were at home. The skills required the foundational skills for reading are best taught in person. So the teachers did an excellent job doing the best they could with those students. But we really now need to take the group of red kids, those 73% of those kids, and really look at them diagnostically and figure out what they need intervention wise to make sure that we start moving them over.
Ms. Bencourt, you might address, or if you want to address the fact that this isn't based on content standards, but it's
No.
based on skills needed
So, yeah.
to learn the content.
So basically, these are skill-based assessments. So we're looking at fluency, we're looking at decoding, we're looking at comprehension, separate, discrete skills that all combine to make students readers. Content standards are what they can do at their grade level. Foundational skills are part of our content standards, but this test breaks them up even more into discrete, separate skills. So we're going to be looking a lot at those skill areas, phonemic awareness, for example, decoding, fluency, accuracy, rate, all of those things go into this assessment. And then you'll get a basic indicator for where those students are. If you look, the way I was a first grade teacher, long time. So the way I look at this, we have first, second, and third grade to move those students over. It's not all going to happen in 1 year. So you work as a primary grade. You vertically align, you move those kids forward, but the goal is that they're constantly moving over to the next band. They're constantly improving so that by the time they hit third grade, we have a good number of those students where we need them to be. And then they can be more successful in meeting their content standards. We can't meet content standards if we have these skills out there that are not being addressed. So it's really important that we look at this as an opportunity to do our jobs, basically, to figure out what these kids need and then make sure they get it. Fourth and fifth, the skills are a little bit different in fourth and fifth. So if you look at a fourth grader, if a student is at risk in fourth grade, by the time students are in fourth grade, they're expected to read grade level content and comprehend it. So they're supposed to think through text. I read this, I can understand this. I read this social studies book, I can read this science passage, and I have good comprehension. I can understand it. I can make meaning out of this. Well, that group of kids, those 52%, can't make meaning out of a fourth grade science text till they can actually comprehend. They may be able to read it, but can they comprehend it? So we're looking at a different skill set as we go through fourth and fifth grade. Some of those kids still need basic decoding, but some of them need more nuanced thinking skills to read through a text and understand it. Not just an English text, but a science text, a social studies text, a health text, whatever they may need to tackle down the road. We need to make sure they have those comprehension strategies, those skills to do that as they become required to do so much more with their reading. We were a little bit surprised about fifth grade when in talking with the principals. We expected it to look more like the other grades, and it didn't. So what we kind of are talking about at the sites, when I was working with the principals, or we've mentioned, those kids that could read held on to their reading skills. That was something they continued to do. You can read at home anytime you want, and they probably did a lot more reading than they do when they're actually in the classroom. So they kept up with some of their skills. We have a good chunk of kids that are yellow that will work hard to move over. And again, we'll address the skills, the skill deficit in that 33%, so that we make sure that they're constant, that they have the the skill set they need to address their content standards at grade level.
And what you're getting tonight is an aggregate from all the grade levels. But
Yes.
if we looked at it site by site, which we have, and then the site's actually broken it down student by student. And we didn't see any outliers, like fourth grade looked the same depending on whatever site you're at,
Mhm.
within 5%. So we just aggregated it tonight for the simplicity of the presentation.
And I would also say that the sites looked similar, so we didn't aggregate it by site either. So you're looking at it as if you're looking at fourth grade district-wide, it pretty much mirrors what fourth grade looked like at every site. So.
Mrs. Betancourt,
Mhm.
one of the things I found speaking to some other teachers, and not just around here across the United States, they're finding the same types of results because the parents were not equipped to teach phonics, or they could read, but they didn't know what questions to ask to comprehend. And one of the teachers said, what she's found now they've only just started school, in order to comprehend and read what was happening, she's doing baking in her class. And they have to eat whatever they bake. So if they haven't followed the directions, she made a comment about, there was a recipe and she told them they had to follow it exactly. And these were third and fourth graders that she had. She had like a combo class. And she said, you must follow it just as it says. And what it did was, it was to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Mhm.
And the first thing it said was, put the peanut butter on the bread. They didn't read about the tools that they needed. So she said, do what it said. So the little boy picked up the peanut butter.
I'll put the whole jar
On the bread.
very literal there.
She said, it's interesting because they didn't know how to follow the direction. He was starting to do other things. And she said, that isn't what it said. So even though we see our children are down, we did some of the best that we could do. And the parents tried, but the frustration you can see. And now, are we breaking them into small groups?
Yes. So based on this data, the elementaries have, and this is our elementary data, they have all developed intervention programs at their sites. Those intervention teachers that we hired are being put to good use. I've met with every single site. We've actually got to see some intervention while it was happening at Hunt. It looked great. They had small groups all over the room with sometimes 5 kids in a group. So I'm encouraged by what we're seeing with the interventions. I think what we need to remember is a lot of the students that are red are going to easily become yellow. They would have been yellow if they had been in school those last 15 months. They would have been moving forward. And you're right, foundational skills do not lend themselves well to distance, to being on Zoom. So I do think we have some potential. Data should never be, data is what it is. It's the facts. It's just the facts, ma'am. And that's the way we need to look at it. So I think if we look at the data for what it is and then make our decisions based on that data, we're always going to be moving kids forward.
Yep.
So it's really just getting this cycle of instructional decision making that improves outcomes for students. It's as simple as that. They show us this, we do what we need to do to get them to the next level. And I feel like we've just come back strong. And I think the elementaries have a good handle on this. And then we're working on moving that model up to the secondaries.
Thank you.
So I'm going to move back this. So we have a test at YOLO in the high school, which uses the Lexile scores to predict whether a student is on track to be college and career ready. And they gave this in early fall. So this is YOLO early on in the year. And if you're looking at this looks a little bit different than our elementaries. And I was thinking about that before I came here tonight because I went through the data again. And this shows a lot of our kids not on track to be college and career ready. So an example of this is, I'm a 7th grader. I'm in the red right now. If I continue on this same path without any intervention or any extra support, if I just keep going through my classes, going through the grade levels, I'm not going to be on track when I graduate for college and, based on the standards, college and career readiness. So this is also a risk indicator. It doesn't look at discrete skills as much as our Dibbles does, but we don't really look at discrete skills in the same way at the secondary and the elementary. But it does tell us that kids are not necessarily reading on grade level. So if I can't read on grade level, how am I going to access that ninth grade or eighth grade science text if I can't even read at the eighth grade level? So we really are working with our secondary administrators and putting interventions in place to address the students who are in the red and the approaching in the orange, which is a large number of students. Now, I would like to know a little bit more about why those students are where they're at. And that's where iReady Diagnostic is going to help. They're going to give us, especially at the secondary, it's going to give us more detailed information. Well, what is keeping them from being successful or college career ready? Is it comprehension? Is it fluency? What is it exactly? And we need to get a little bit more granular with our secondary students. And once we understand what's keeping them from being on grade level, then we can address it better at the secondary level. So they've been working on plans, and I think we're going to be meeting on those tomorrow. Also at our EC meeting, we go over them every time we meet at the secondary level for how they're going to address the students who need more support for literacy.
Mrs. Bettencourt, one other, can we find out, or do we know the students that are far below or approaching, how much they use the Zoom lessons during the year and a half? I mean, was it hit or miss? I mean, does the group of students fall in that I really didn't do it because I didn't like it?
I believe there's probably some data that could be correlated to attendance. I think that I don't necessarily know their engagement with Zoom is going to give us the best information moving forward, but I do think there could be definitely a correlation. I don't want to generalize for all students.
And I would caution that just correlation is actually causation when working with data.
Yes.
So just because there's a correlation doesn't mean it
Doesn't
one
mean it
cause
causes
the other.
Right.
And our focus is really about moving forward. As Chris said. So how can we use this to drive tomorrow, not yesterday?
Now we know who the students are. I mean, each site knows who that YOLO knows. They have names for those 38.6% of those students. So that's really where we're going to have to take those student by student and figure out what is the next step with this group of kids. And same data, same assessment for Oristimba, very similar results. So, basically the same thing. It's a point in time. So today, 47% of our kids at Oristimba, when they graduate, would not be on track. Now, remember, you have to remember, that's if we do nothing. They just keep going through their classes, but we're not going to do nothing. We're going to address this issue. So we'll be coming back often with data. And I think that's really important because it keeps all of us accountable to the results, to the facts, to the students. So you'll see very similar results for Oristimba that you did with YOLO, and they are also working on an intervention plan at their site. We only have data for elementary math, and I hope Mrs. Robles doesn't mind me using her name here, but her and I actually sat and talked through this. We were really surprised by this data. We thought it would look a little bit more like our ELA data. Actually, we thought it would look a lot more red. Our kids, it's about a third, and a third, if you put the yellow and the orange together. And so that was encouraging, but we also have something that we're really looking forward, or I believe is really going to support our students no, I don't believe it. I know it. Once we implement it correctly, and we are, it's called RAMP, and it really identifies before a student goes into a math module, what learning needs to take place for them to be successful. So if I'm going to start module 1, a teacher gives a pre-assessment that basically says, before they can be successful in module 1, you need to remediate this. And we can run our interventions right off of that data. So that's new. The county came up with it while we were in distance learning. It's something that we're implementing K 1st through 8th. And I think that will really help our teachers focus their instruction and understand which students need what. That's always the most important part. You should know exactly what you're targeting in an intervention. Then once you've met that target, you go to the next target. So we really need to get very diagnostic and targeted in those interventions. We don't have math data for the high school, and the junior high school, but we will right after we have our iReady diagnostic, and we'll bring that back to you. A couple things for next steps. We will be doing, I think the diagnostic begins late October. You'll have data early November. This is year 0. So we're really just focusing in on administering the diagnostic and understanding the data. We'll definitely take it to the next level in the 22-23 school year. iReady is a strong predictor of success on the SBAC. So we can basically say if we give it in, April and late February, or I'm sorry, March or April, it's going to tell us how our students, it should be no surprise what happens on the SBAC if we've been, once we give the diagnostic. Those are our scheduled windows. Oh, I'm sorry, they're right there. So 10:25 to 11:05. And iReady is actually going to come back and sit with us and review the data. Each site will have data review, and they'll actually target grade levels too. So kinder and first will have their own time to go over their data with an iReady representative. And iReady, along with our skills-based assessments, Dibbles and Achieve 3000, will support our targeted intervention, our enrichment, and instructional decision-making. Information is power. That's what we need to get our students. This whole 15 months, we have to be looking at data and going through that cycle. What do we do next? What do we do next? We just can't stop. We have to be, there's an urgency in it. I feel the urgency. I know the principals feel the urgency. Mr. Posey has sat with me on data, and I appreciate it. I really appreciate it because I have someone to talk to about it. It's like, what are we going to do for this? And he's very involved in that. And I think that's a good thing for our district. I do think that it's really going to be, it's key that we use this information to make good decisions for our students. Any other questions?
Well, but whatever happened to the SBAC results for 11th grade last?
They are out, but embargoed. So they're still embargoed. I just got an email maybe last week. They're talking fall. Well, this fall, they're talking, I think early November. It should come out to the public early November. And actually it's taking a lot longer than it usually does. And I'm not quite sure why they embargoed it. I think I can say without like being, I don't know, is there a embargo police or something? I can say we did better in ELA than in math, and that's kind of what we expected. So, and it's only for 11th grade. So, but we will get that data to you. I'm sure the next time we do a data presentation, we'll be able to bring that data to you.
And I want to just kind of thank Mrs. Betancourt and the principals and the teachers, because what you saw, I mean, it's pretty clear how much work went into gathering these baseline data, and that's what they are. They're baseline, data. And I've said to the staff and to the classified and paraprofessionals and to the teachers, we're going to beat COVID with pharmaceuticals and the pharmacies, but we're going to beat the effects of COVID with our intervention programs. Mm-hmm. And that is our paraprofessionals and our classified support, helping those students one-on-one individually recover I'm going to say learning loss, but the lack of accelerated learning. And we'll get there, but we need these type of baseline data to tell us what to do next. And that's what we're working towards.
And I just want to add, we are really focusing in on also professional development for our classified staff, because they are partners in this mission, if you want to call it a mission, and it is a mission. So they're getting a lot of additional professional development so that we can ensure that they're prepared to deal with what we're asking them to do, which is partner with the teachers to improve student outcomes. So, we know how much they support our students, so we want to make sure they're supported also. And we've started a series of workshops for our classified staff, our instructional aides.
So the plan is each month to have this item on the agenda, and we'll be addressing different, maybe not always English and math. It could be social emotional polls that we've taken, or it could be how we're progressing along on our special ed goals as well. But the board will be updated each month as new data comes in and new programs are rolled out.
We have a new member of our board, and Mr. Posey, would you like to introduce her, or would you? Oh, that's right. Okay, I'm doing. I know. Yes, well, we didn't have half as many people. Ms. Castaneda, would you give us your report, please?
Good evening, everybody. From when we last met, Oristimba has gone a few changes and updates. For starters, our Dig Pink game is going on. It's played by our girls volleyball team. The proceeds from the game are going to be going to the Side Out Foundation for breast cancer awareness. We are very proud of our girls who are helping with this cause. So far, we have had 3 home football games, and all of them have been full of spirit, and everybody's just feeling so happy to be back on the stands and on the field. Our Lady Warriors, the cheerleaders, have done a really good job with their routines, as well as the band, who has learned new music to help motivate our football players and the crowd. So last Saturday, the band actually had their first competition in Elk Grove since COVID stopped them. This Saturday, they will actually be having a band review at Santa Cruz. It's a big deal. So the students are very excited and are training hard to get a high score. Our clubs are up and running. You know, we have the NAMI Mental Health Club. They've been doing a lot. They've been really spreading awareness about the stigma against mental health around our school. GSA has been having meetings. The STEM Club is having meetings. The Rotary Club is having meetings as well. And they've done a lot of activities as well. Our senior class has been working diligently for homecoming. This year's theme is Warriors Got Game, and they are centering their floats on board games. So the senior class chose Monopoly, the juniors chose Candyland, sophomores chose Sorry, and the freshmen chose Battleship. So float building will begin very soon. And how it's going to work is that 2 classes are going to be allowed to construct their float at the same time, and then switch with another group of classes per COVID regulations, and just make sure everybody is safe. They're very excited, especially the underclassmen. They're a little bit confused, but I think they're getting the hang of it. Yeah, it's a little bit. They're getting the hang of it. So our plans concerning rivalry games are up and going as well. Oristimba will be hosting this year's game, and we're gonna get the chief back, okay? We're gonna the Stanislaus Sheriff Department will actually be helping with the security process. Mr. Pruitt let me know that we will be having horses. Very cool, very exciting. So even with all these exciting things at our school as well as other schools underwent a very negative situation concerning an online trend that prompted students to go around vandalizing their campus. And unfortunately, Oristimba did have students commit such acts. But once the students saw how disheartened our staff was and the precaution they took, they quickly made moves to protect our campus. And this is an illustration and reflection on the maturity and efficiency that our students and staff had against this serious situation. They really stepped up to the plate when they knew they had to. And I think that it's a good thing. It's something positive came out of the negative. And so our students' maturity to unfair situations doesn't stop there. Recently, in September 16th, students got together after school to address their concerns about the dress code. And with the help of adults and the inspiration from other high schools' dress code, they want to revise the much older one, which, by the way, has not been changed since the 80s. Pretty long time. So the students aim to have no offense. So,
Century.
the students want to have a balance between comfort and freedom and appropriate schoolwear that was not found with the previous rules. We look forward to see the new revised dress code and applaud the students who made appropriate actions in expressing their uncertainty on the situation. Thanks to these changes, students will feel more comfortable with their attire, and teachers can deal with more serious situations in their classrooms instead of the uncertainty that comes with how their students dressed. Overall, there really have been significant ups and downs, but our students have been able to navigate and take part of positive activities. I look forward to reporting in next month's news, and thank you for listening.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing the dress code. The 80s.
Yeah, 1980, that's a
That's a
long.
long time ago.
Hey, we looked good when we dressed for high school in the 80s.
Yeah, that's, I was already out of school. Okay, next we have the financing update, Measure X project. Mr. Dale Scott.
Yeah, we're pleased to have Dale Scott here with us today to talk about the Measure X construction projects, particularly the Von Renner multipurpose room and the pool at Orriston High School.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I was thinking maybe you could just update the dress code to the 90s. Every year or two, do a decade. This will be a very short presentation on what is going to happen with the bond measure that was passed now almost a year ago. Hard to imagine, but let's take a quick whirl through it here. As you know, the main focus of these bonds has to do with the assessed valuation of the community. And this district has continued to thrive. When I say this district, I mean all of the property owners within the district. Last year was a little less than the average, 3.4%, but still over, you can see, since 2010, there has just been a continual 5 to 7% increase every year in assessed valuation. I don't think that will continue at that level, but I do think over the next 5 or 10 years, there may be some bumps in the road, but there's going to continue to be modest growth as you go on, which is good news. Good news for all of the district and all the taxpayers. There has been great support in this district by the voters. There have been 4 measures that have been passed: 2000, 2008, 2016, and then again in 2020. And that's the measure that we're talking about, when $25.82 million was approved by the voters by 60%. Now, just to refresh your memory on that, that bond was structured or was offered to the voters with the caveat that there would be an attempted no increase in tax rates. Now, that's not a legal requirement. That's simply the pledge that we are going to attempt to keep that tax rate. So what we have to do is always go back and look at what the tax rates are for the measures that have already been passed, the previous measures, the 2000, the 2008, and the 2016. We do that by making some assumptions about the growth. And you can see the 2000 election, which is in purple, is almost gone. That's 5 more years. And then for the 2000 and 2016, they are stepping down over time. And I think that's, again, as I've said before here, that's a real testament to the board and to the administration to keep those tax rates as low as possible and not be going up, to be going down, which is what they should be doing. So what we proposed to voters, and they accepted, was that the $25.8 million would be structured in a way that tax rates would continue at that, it's about $140 per $100,000 assessed valuation. And that is the blue that you see in that projection. However, and this is the important part, for the next 3 or 4 years, the tax rates are going to continue at that $140, $135 level. They're not going to really start dropping down to about 2025. So the workaround on that is to issue something called a bond anticipation note. It's like a working capital or a bridge fund. And that note will be issued with your approval in next year, in 2022. The proposed amount will be $14.5 million. There will be no interest paid on that note during that period of time when we're trying to stabilize the tax rate. There's no interest and no principal. And then in 2025, you will pay it off with the first, in fact, the only major issue of that financing. So that second financing will come in. Part of it will be used to pay off the note and the interest during that time. And the rest of it will be for continuing projects. So the plan is, this can change. The plan is that you will receive in 2022, $14.5 million for the projects that are being currently anticipated. And then 3 years later, you'll receive an additional $10.3 million, and that would complete the bond. That's not that you have to do it that way, but that's the current projection. I'm going to go to the schedule for in just a second, but I want to pause there and see if there's any questions about the structure or how it works. We've been through it before a few times.
Yeah, when I read this, preparing for the meeting, what I understood was that we would issue the bond anticipation note for $14.5 million. Then in 2025, we'd go ahead and sell all $25 million worth of bonds. Some of that would be $10 million to build new projects in 2025, and 14.5 million of that would be paying back the short-term note that we had in the middle. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
It'll be more than 14 and a half though, because there'll also be the interest that's being
Right.
accrued during that period. And
Right.
and that's, we don't know exactly what that amount's going to be, but it'll be sizable because you have 3 years where it's sitting there. But that's the only way to get through that keyhole to not increase tax rates during those 3 years.
So the way to follow up, we couldn't issue an $8 or a $10 million issuance of bonds in the next 2 or 3 years and issue this 25 million over a period of 2 or 3 series of 2 or 3s.
you can do that.
Start a little earlier, eh?
You can structure it in many ways. This particular structure has been worked with Carolyn and with the superintendent. Try to come up with as much funding as possible, as soon as possible. And that's what this is. Now, if you say, gee, well, maybe we don't want that much, maybe we can hold back, then we would dial that back a little bit and the amounts would be less. And they would come over a longer time. But this shows what we believe to be the maximum amount that can be received in 2022. And then the earliest that you would be able to receive the second portion in 2025.
Okay, thank you.
Timing wise, pretty straightforward. We would be bringing a resolution to the district for approval at your November board meeting. It's a very interesting piece I just want to point out. We're hoping to bring this financing into the market in the first or second week of 2022. If all goes well, that should be, my experience has been, I mean, like everybody's experience, New Year's comes, everybody goes back to work and says, what was I doing? You know, I'm sure there's something I'm supposed to be doing here. Oh, maybe we should issue some, but if we have it there and ready to go, you may be one of the only districts in the market at that time. And so everybody would hopefully want to buy it, and that would cause the interest rates to go down. It's worked in the past. We'll see if it works this time. Anyway, through that process, if we stay on track, you would have the funding available by the end of January. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'm not clear on exactly what we're selling or buying. Will we be going to a bank and asking for a loan that's going to be paid off when these come? Or are we going to be offering like a futures contract or a derivative kind of contract?
No, it's not. It's a public offering, and it's called a bond anticipation note. It's short term. It only lasts it can last up to 5 years.
Okay.
And the investor who is purchasing it is being guaranteed by you that you will issue those bonds in order to pay off the note. So therefore, during that period of time, when the bond anticipation note is outstanding, you can't issue any of those bonds because you are pledging them for the repayment of that bond anticipation note. And that's all it is. I mean, they say bond anticipation note. It's also easy to think of it as sort of a bridge loan. That would be another way, but it will be a public sale. There will be bids on for the interest rate. There'll be 1 or 2 bids for the interest rates. It's a very small market, but I'm confident you'll have good participation.
And then presumably, if something weird happens, like the Republicans and Democrats don't get along and we default on the national debt or something loony, we have to issue those at that bond anticipation note. So if something happens and the price of real estate drops 20% again, we're stuck issuing bonds no matter what, correct?
Well, you're stuck issuing that amount of bonds to pay off those notes.
Okay.
Yes. You could always roll that note over for an additional 2 years. There's a maximum of 5 years that you can do it. So you have a little bit of flexibility there.
Okay.
Um, If I can just go back to that one slide, I mean, that, when you see that drop in those assessed valuation rates, just remember what was going on the backside of that.
Mm-hmm.
Where prices were going up in real estate 20-30% a year. I mean, you can see the numbers here, 23.7%, it looks like in 1 year. I mean, those were non-sustainable numbers.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think it's going to, certainly it's possible they won't get along. It's possible, but I don't foresee that kind of really long-term impact on property values
Sure.
because of that. But
Yeah.
you are right. That is a potential.
And we had long discussions about that very item because that was my concern too, is what about the what ifs? And it's really not likely that what happened in 2007, 2008, 2009 is going to repeat itself because there were so many other extenuating factors.
Mhm.
It wasn't just real estate. There were a lot of things on the whole financial market that are not happening now. And that the regulations have been put in place to prevent something like that from happening again.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you very much. We'll be back in, unless there are any other questions, we'll be back in November.
Thank
And
you.
this may be more for staff than for Mr. Scott. Thank you so much for coming out. But where are we sitting in terms of expecting money from the state? I think we've finished some projects that they owe us some money on, but I don't know if there's everybody got a crystal ball for when it comes.
We do not, because we're at the mercy of when the state issues bonds to repay those, and we're in line for a small amount of money for the 2 additional classrooms in the Barrington Library. And then we've started the process for the new classroom wing at YOLO.
Okay.
And I believe there's a question about the pool and the multi-purpose room. There are no matching funds unless it is a classroom.
Okay.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Gill? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, Facilities inspection tool report and award. Mr. Vargas?
Good evening. I'd just like to point out to Lexia that this sweater is from 1989 and it has come back in style twice since then. And so I just want to point that out. I'll be wearing it to work tomorrow. Good evening, Superintendent Posey, Board President Conforti, and to all the members of the Newman Crows Landing Unified School District School Board. The annual fit inspection has been developed by OPSC, which is the Office of Public School Construction, to determine if a school facility is in good repair, as defined by Education Code Section 17002. And it is also used as part of the Williams Act inspection. These inspections are required to occur within the first 30 days of school at all public schools in the state of California. So on August 27th, John Cincinnati from SCOE and I completed facility walks at Hurd Barrington, Von Renner, YOLO Middle School. Our remaining 4 school sites were inspected by me along with our site's lead custodians using the same fit format. Our ongoing challenge as maintenance workers, custodians, grounds, is to maintain and improve all of our facilities' appearance and functionality despite the heavy use and the ongoing wear and tear that they endure on a daily basis. I want to thank those students that are here today that have a part in that. Thank you, guys. So our ongoing challenge, as you know, is also our district's goal. And so we developed the annual FIT award to allow school sites to be recognized for improvements made to their facilities FIT score from the previous year. This year's inspections had no real surprises and included only minor issues on the reports that have since been addressed. So for this year's scores and awards, in third place with an increased fit score of 0.28%, I'm going to get it right, Bonita Elementary School in third place. In second place with an increased score of 1.53%, or Simba High School. And I am happy to announce this year, the winner with the highest percentage of growth with a fit score increase of 1.75% goes to Yolo Middle School. Ms. Smith, I'd like to present you with the annual Fit Award and ask your custodial staff to come on up. So this is Mike Galvin. Mike Galvin is our lead custodian at Yolo. Cecilia Sombrano is our night custodian, and Oscar Diaz is the newest member of the team. Just over a year now, right, Oscar? You've been with the district? And so I want to start by presenting this plaque to Ms. Smith that can be placed inside of the trophy case over at Yolo Middle School. It says 2021, 2022 Yolo Middle School, NCLUSD Annual Fit Award winner. This award is given to the school with the highest percentage of growth in the area of improved facilities. So congratulations to you and your great custodial team. One more thing here. I'd also like to recognize the front of the room, Mike Galvin, who's been with the district for a number of years, and our two Yolo night custodians who in tandem maintain the Yolo campus. What I'd like you folks to know, being a former custodian, it is not easy to every day come into a classroom that you just cleaned the night before. And basically you're kind of doing the same thing, putting things in their place, getting the school clean and safe and ready to use for the next school day. Mike, being the day custodian and the lead, also handles maintenance requests at the site. So whenever something gets broken, Mike is usually the gentleman that will take care of it, or he asks for help from maintenance. And what I want to point out, and this is really a reflection of what's happening, in real time. As you guys know, not just our school, but a lot of schools dealt with the effects of the TikTok challenge. And I really want to show my appreciation for Mike, Cecilia, and Oscar, because even when things were being broken day after day, they continue to put them back. Because what I want you to understand is when a soap dispenser gets knocked off the wall, that's just one less resource that another student gets to use. So their passion was to fix it. They didn't complain. They didn't say, oh, I can't do my job because everybody else is making it harder. They continue to do their job every day despite those challenges. And so tradition, the Fit Award winner, that school, I recognize as the maintenance and operations director by treating them to lunch. So Mike Galvin, this is your lunch ticket. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just in closing, I wanted to give the school board an opportunity. I believe you've all received hard copies of the FIT reports. If you have any questions or think of any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. I'm very involved with those inspections, whether it's a site that I walk with our custodians or with our SCOE director. I do want to give one compliment the director did point out during the inspection. Back in 2020, we changed our plumbing to have all touchless faucets. which was not just a plumbing upgrade, but it was an efficiency upgrade ergonomically to allow our students to wash their hands without touching the chrome fixture. And so he complimented that we did that district-wide. We didn't just choose one school or one location or one restroom. We did it across the district. And he was impressed with that, and I just wanted to share his comments. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vargas. Okay, Assembly Bill 361.
Yeah, thank you. So the legislature has passed a bill that would allow school districts to remain in remote school board meetings, engage in a hybrid, both remote and live, or as we're doing today, 100% in person. It's a board's choice to do that. This bill extends that through January of 2024. So for a long period of time. Some interesting notes in the bill is if we were to go to a hybrid or to a remote location meeting, we're back to Zoom, you do have to allow for real-time public comment. So the way it was during the COVID shutdown, any public wanted to make comment would email executive assistant, and we would put it into the record that way, simply mark that it was in the record, and you would get a copy of the email. The 361 wants that to be live time. So we'd have to discuss the mechanisms if we choose to do that, whether we want that to be via like a Zoom chat type of feature, or make the public comment live Zoom, where they would come on camera and we would tax our wonderful tech department to figure out how to display that on our video screens. Sure, we can get this done. And or if we want to keep it as it is now, with public comes in and we're open to the public and we don't have a online presence other than our recorded meetings that we put on our website. So this is on the agenda to kind of get a consensus from the board, and we'll bring it back as an action item next meeting to approve what you would decide you would like to do. The big questions is the format of the meeting, if you'd like to be in person only, a hybrid, or remote only. And if you do choose either hybrid or remote, how would you like that methodology of public comment?
Members. I would also, I don't like Zoom at all. Half the time my computer's not working. I just like the personal touch of it. And I think sometimes if you have somebody that has a problem, sometimes they hide behind a computer. I'd rather see the person face to face, although this is a little bit hard. But to me, I'd much rather have what we have now. And if there is a problem, if we do at times have someone sometimes email us and we hope to solve their problem. I mean, rather than hiding behind a screen or that.
I think I would like to stay with the format that we have right now. I'm in favor of that. I would ask though, is let's say COVID-20 came along. We could always revisit this question,
Yes.
At some other point if things change completely.
It's an excellent point. It's not a deadline you could pass. If what I'm hearing is the consensus is to keep it as is, there would be no further action unless I was alerted that we might want to change it due to COVID-21 or whatever we're going to call that. We'll say that begrudgingly, but yeah, it's any time up till 2024.
Okay, well then I'd like to just stay with what.
Okay.
I agree. I'd like it to be the way it is right now, unless something unforeseen happens, and then we'll visit it at that point.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I much prefer the in-person, and I very much critical of the process of having people hand their comments in earlier. I think the real value of comments is letting people get stuff off their chest, and we can hear it, and they can see their problems addressed. And I didn't think that did a particularly good job of that. Probably the concern would be that some other districts are facing some really ugly stuff out of the public, And I think that it's rarely their own constituents, but there's a handful of people that are rabble rousing. And if it comes to the point that our staff's health and safety is in gender, then we need to go deal with that at the time. But if it's our own folks that want to come complain about masks or critical race theory or something like that, I'd rather give them a chance to say their piece and address their elected members.
So thank you for that. Then there'll be no further action because we're not changing. So we'll just keep it the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Posey. Okay. Next, we have some readings it's the board's homework. First reading of AR 3320 claims and actions against the district. BP 6102 response to instruction and intervention. 20, did I say 26? Response to instruction and intervention. BP and AR 6164.5 student success teams. BP 4131 staff development. BP 6164.4 identification and evaluation of individuals for special education. AR 6164.41 children with disabilities enrolled by their parents in private school. BP and AR 6164.4 identification and evaluation of individuals for special education, and BP 3516.5 emergency schedules. So we have a couple to look at, and sometimes it's only a little bit change when we're doing it.
I just had a comment on this. I want to thank staff so much for getting us the update sheet on this, and it gives you a chance to look through. Most of what we've got here is just stuff where the state law changed and they said, there was one of them, move it from this pile of papers to that pile of papers. But I do think that as a board, I think something we could maybe improve our practices on is pulling some of these out. Now, staff development, I pulled out and made a couple of notes on. There's some places, these policies are places that we as a board have an opportunity to really represent the community well. And generally, what we're seeing is stuff that CSBA has written and it's paraphrased, we follow the law. But we have some opportunities sometimes to be more specific. The district staff evaluation, this is a piece that's in tonight's staff development. The district staff evaluation process may be used to recommend additional individualized staff development for individual employees. That is something that we could get into as a board and offer our staff an opportunity to really, I think it's going to be fairly hard to come into a certificate teacher and say, hey, we found you lacking in this. We really want you to, but we as a board could stand behind and give them some more support in that. So I think there's some of these that maybe we need to pull out and have a different process for dealing with, where they're not just, but they're not just updates to follow the law. Hey, take them out of this pile of papers and put them in that pile of papers, and it still says the exact same thing or whatever. But some of these are some that I think that maybe we want to weigh in on a little more carefully and speak to how it should happen in our community. This, as it sits right now, it's very difficult to have any accountability because they're really written just to say, we follow the law. So anyway, I think that maybe that's something that over the long term, I'm not expecting, people to run around and there's 4 other opinions here, but I think that we could maybe do something different with some of these to the ones where we want to take a stand and make a say and say, hey, this affects our district and this is how our community would like to see it. I wanted to throw that
I
out.
think it's an excellent point, and I think that the mechanism to do that would be the first read is tonight, and you'll take it home. And then if you read it and say, well, I'd like to have a discussion on that, then you would let the board president know to pull it out of the en masse action item. And it would be a separate action item that then we could discuss, make motions on to change and that type of thing. That's kind of the mechanism with that first read, second read.
Okay, sounds
format.
good.
Some of them, especially like the one that you spoke to, I know principals are constantly in getting new information, and they'll say someone in the science department or the math department, here's a really good weekend class.
Mhm.
You might like to look into it rather than formally. And then like Mrs. Report, I know probably does things like that also, and Mr. Smith. It's kind of, I want to say almost built into the makeup. And a lot of times it's fostering teachers who are either just starting or teachers who have, if you've been teaching for a very long time, need a little bit of, motivation, Red Bull. But yes, that would be a good idea. So
Thank you.
thank you. Okay, action items. Consent calendar. The consent calendar items are routine in nature and usually do not require board discussion. Individual items may be removed by board members and presented for discussion and separate action. The consent calendar will be adopted by a roll call vote. And Mr. Posey, did you want to, you did? After approval, okay.
I move to approve as published.
Mr. Wallace,
Aye.
Mrs. Hurst. Aye. Mr. Snodderly,
Aye.
Mr. Bizarre,
Aye.
Mrs. Conforti votes aye. It's passed 5-0.
Madam President, it's my pleasure then with action item 1I have actually formally hired our new director of after school programs who's here tonight. So Miss Allison Cassidy, if you could stand up in the way. I won't say how many years of experience she has in after school programs, but her career is well decorated and each decoration is well deserved. I look forward to, as she described it, her brand of after school programming meshing with our culture and becoming our after school program, which will really play an important role in the intervention piece as well as the nurturing of the students and the social emotional well-being. In the next couple board meetings, I don't know exactly when, we'll have an after school program report. I think she's hearing that for the first time right now. So her breath, but we'll hear how it's going and what the plans are for the future. And I know that the immediate comments from the principals have been, thank you, we appreciate the help, because she's taken a big responsibility off that plate and now they can focus more on their primary roles. And I'm looking forward to working with her.
Thank you, Mr. Posey, and thank you, Ms. Cassidy. Accept the 2021-2022 Facilities Inspection Tools Report. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Mr. Wallace,
Aye.
Mrs. Hurst. Aye. Mr. Snodderly,
Aye.
Mr. Bizarre,
Aye.
and Mrs. Conforti votes aye. Pass 5-0. Adopt ESSER 3 plan. Are there any comments or questions first to ask about the plan? No? Okay. May I have a motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, Mr. Wallace,
Aye.
Mrs. Hurst,
Aye.
Mr. Snodderly,
Aye.
Mr. Bizarre,
Aye.
Mrs. Conforti votes aye. It passes 5-0. Accept Williams Settlement Uniform Complaint Report for July, August, and September 2021. May I have a motion?
I'll second it.
Mr. Wallace,
Aye.
Mrs. Hurst,
Aye.
Mr. Snodderly,
Aye.
Mr. Bizarre,
Aye.
and Mrs. Conforti votes aye. It passes 5-0. Appoint Pool Subcommittee.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Wallace and I met with city council representatives and the city manager to have our 2+2 communication meeting last month. And it really was dominated by talk of the pool and the joint use of the pool and how the management of the summer swim program would work. And all members believed it would be in the best interest to appoint a subcommittee to just look at that pool issue for the next 18 months. Otherwise, it is going to dominate and entirely take up the agenda as a 2+2. So the city will be appointing 2 people to the pool subcommittee. We're asking tonight that the board consider 2 people to be on the subcommittee, and we'll meet for the next 18 months until the pool opens, maybe a little bit after that, to talk about those issues that come up. Ms. Mendoza will be joining us as as appropriate for the finance side. And so it's really asking tonight that we appoint 2 people to serve on a pool subcommittee to work with the city.
Thank you, Mr. Posey. Is there anyone, or are there 2 people that would like to,
I'd be interested in serving on it.
Mr. Bizarre? Is there, do we have another person?
Mr. Stoddard has got a chance.
Oh, Mr. Sefway, thank you. And they will be given what the dates will be as ongoing?
We'll get those set up and we'll try to make them regular, like every so many day of the month type thing, like every second Tuesday or something like that. We'll get that set up with both of the schedules.
And then
I
as
think we
part of.
will need an action, like a motion to appoint the 2.
Mhm.
I make a motion that we appoint Mr. Snodderly and Mr. Bizarre to the full subcommittee.
Okay. May I have a second?
I second.
Okay, Mr. Wallace,
Aye.
Mrs. Hurst,
Aye.
Mr. Snodderly,
Aye.
Mr. Bizarre,
Aye.
and Mrs. Conforti votes aye, 5-0. This would be interesting too, and then you can give us updates.
Yeah,
as of
yeah,
time.
just
thank you.
remind the city they're responsible for the snacks.
I will have you know that they provided snacks at the last 2 plus 2
Or-
meeting.
And I'll add to that, Mr. Walls, ours are better.
And the next 2+2 meeting is it next week?
Sounds right.
I think it's next week, yes. Okay, accept annual mandatory Williams Act visitation report of findings. A motion, please.
I'd make that motion.
A second. Mr. Wallace,
Aye.
Mrs. Hurst,
Aye.
Mr. Snodderly,
Aye.
Mr. Bizarre,
Aye.
Mrs. Conforti votes aye. It's passed 5-0. Future agenda items are Citizens Oversight Committee Annual Report and the Board Governance Calendar. Are there any other parts that we'd like to have put on? No, not at the time. Okay, Mr. Posey, your Superintendent Report?
Thank you, Madam President. I will start with the transportation report, as it seems to be the
Mhm.
interesting. We looked into what the pay rates and so if you know anybody want to be a bus driver, please. The pay rates starting August 4th, so they moved these up August 4th. This was a question from a board member. They start at $21 an hour, which is very competitive with, I looked at other school districts who have transportation departments who don't vendor out, and saw about $20 an hour starting. So this is equivalent to about a year 3 transport or bus driver at a school district. After the first year, the pay goes up $2 to $23. After the second year, it goes up to $25. What's interesting about this pay structure, it looks a lot like a school district's pay structure if you have a transportation department. Start around 20 and a half and end at about 25, but it takes about 6 years to get there if you were employed by a school district, whereas this is a 2-year progression. So they're very competitive. The pay is very competitive. They do have a $1,000 sign-on bonus once you get the Class B license, which is what is needed, the certificate. So they are offering some incentives, some sign-on incentives. For certified drivers, they have a $2,000 immediate sign-on bonus if you already have your school bus license. You know anybody out there, please. They also do a 1-year $1,500 retention bonus. So first student who we contract with is doing everything they can. I mean, they're a company, they worry about their bottom line. It's a business, but they're doing everything they can to recruit drivers. They have 3 waiting to do the test. They have 13 ready to go into the behind the wheel, which is one-on-one behind the wheel. The issue they run into is they only have 2 trainers, and it's one-on-one, it's 20 hours. So it kind of gets backlogged at that point. The 2 is good because it used to be 1. They've doubled that force by going to 2. Where we're going to run into a little bit of an issue is in terms of driver needs. Believe it or not, we're really well staffed compared to the other districts they serve. We normally have 6 routes. 5 of them are now filled. So we're down a driver, which would solve the rest of our transportation issues. They also contract with a neighboring district that normally has 10 buses. They now only have 4. So they've expanded their range of walking to 3 miles. They don't bus until it's outside of 3 miles. And so in fairness, it was supposed to be you get one, we get one, you get one, we get one. But with their so far behind ours, they're going to get the next couple drivers to try to alleviate that 3-mile walk. And I understand that. Also, they service the SELPA, the special ed students of the district, for their services. Normally, to run a full route, they need 15 drivers. They have 11. So, everybody's floating 40% to 66% of staffing. We're at 87%, 83% of staffing. We're kind of ahead of the curve. And so it's going to be a little bit before we get our next driver, our last driver. I talked to first student today. They believe, well, they told me to say beginning of next year, not next school year, next calendar year in January. They think maybe mid-December, but that's the same difference because winter break is mid-December. So it's really beginning of the year. To help out with, I know our Diablo Grande pickups are now in the dark, and hopefully soon it'll be raining. Not that I'm hope that on the kids, but for our own needs, we need rain. So we have worked out a new schedule that will pick them up 20 minutes later. We're going to roll that out next Monday. It'll be the first day of that. We're going to we have to give time for notification. And we thank food services and the principals for working with that, because it really means that some students are going to be eating meals maybe for the first 5 or 10 minutes of the school day, but it'll help everybody get to school at a better hour than in the dark. That's our goal. We do catch a little bit of a break in November, early November, when the time changes. The sunrise comes an hour earlier too. So that'll help us a little bit. But they are working, first student is working very well with us. They've communicated with us the entire time. We just got a little bit of setback. It's like took 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and had some, I guess, people leave the profession, and that kind of hurt us a little bit. So that's the transportation. I attended a 2+2 meeting with the city. I've mentioned earlier, it was pretty much introductions, and then really a lot about the pool and the summer swim program. And yeah, I know the pool isn't even bid on yet, but we hope to hear back from the state here in the next couple of weeks and get the approval to move that forward. But we believe that January of 2023, when it'll be done and completed, is going to be upon us quicker than we think. And there's a lot of logistics to go through with any type of a dual use facility that we anticipate this being, to serve both the public and our students. And so that's what we talked about for the most part of that meeting. It was a nice meeting. It was very cordial. I look forward to future meetings with the city. It was a really good collaborative meeting. I want to thank Mr. Smith. We have a COVID-19 dashboard up and running. And when I say Mr. Smith, I mean him and his department, who compile those, Department of One, who compile those numbers on a daily basis, but update that weekly on Wednesdays. So you can go to our website and you can see exactly the COVID cases in the district and how many there are, and how that trend is going. The next month's data update, we will be looking a bit at social emotional learning. We have the pre-test done for how students feel on campus. We'll be sharing that with the board, as well as some preliminary data from the RAMP assessments and post-module tests. I don't think we will have iReady first diagnostic. They'll be done, but probably not ready to report out. It'll be really close. So you may see that, or I may give Kim a day break and we'll wait until December to report those out. I was pleased and was joined by Ms. Conforti and Ms. Hertz to attend the Dig Pink this afternoon. I got to see the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade games, and I didn't see the end of the 8th grade. We were winning when I left, but
They were tied.
they were making a
When we left, they were tied.
they were making a comeback. Yeah, so that was fun, and a really a great showing of the community coming together for a cause, and just really, you walk in and just see how big it was. It was neat, and I appreciate the organizers for doing that. And then sadly, well, first I want to thank Brittany Clark, but sadly, she planned a great memorial for Mary Frances on Saturday and attended the services on Friday. And I just ask that we keep her family and her in our thoughts and prayers. And it's a tough time right now, and just ask we do that. That's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Posey. Mr. Bazar?
Well, I said this last week, but I'm just happy that we're back in school. It's amazing to me that the first quarter has come to an end. It's hard to believe how fast school goes this year. Anyway, I think it's going very well this year, and I look forward to every meeting we're going to have. Thanks.
Mrs. Hurst?
Come on. Okay. I want to say that I hope that Fire Prevention Education Week went okay and that the youngsters learned much. And for me, Dig Pink is very important because I remember a few years back being presented with a t-shirt that had my name on it. And every year I'm invited back to be honored, and I get a corsage. And I thank the people who organize that and all the people that come to that. So it's a very, very, very special event for me.
Mr. Snodderly?
Who's the IT guy? Raise your hand. Hey, your app is working good for the district. I'm starting to get notifications again about, what's going on, meetings, the good things, sports and all that. So good job. Kudos to the maintenance people. Seems like I say that every month, but the classified staff, if you're follow the night custodian around sometime and you'll see how hard those guys work. And then the last thing is that we did talk a little bit last month, or made a comment about maybe moving board meetings around and, different sites, all that. I would, like to see that go to different, I know there's the IT guy will say, no way. But maybe move to some of the other schools. We had a nice school board meeting up at Diablo Grande, and so it might bring more people in, So overall, good job. We'll work on Dibbles again next month, never ending Dibbles. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Wallace?
And I'm sure Mrs. Conforti will have her own thoughts to share as well, but we had a really productive 2-on-2 meeting. And I think that there was very much a feeling in the room that this is a relationship that needs some work. We've kind of stuck our thumbs in each other's eyes repeatedly over the years. I mean, honestly, 10 years ago, one of the things that got me here was a staff that's completely different than the folks that were here today, but I was working with the city at the time, and we went through and did a whole new plan, and the school district walked in and said, no, we're going to sue you. I'm like, wait a minute, I was sitting next to a school board guy. Why didn't you ask for this stuff already? So there's been those kind of things, and the school board's done it to the city's done it right back to the schools. And I really felt like there was a honest desire in that room to make that relationship work better. I think that we all really believe that we serve basically the same folks, and that they're ready to make things better, and we're ready to make things better, and but that it's a relationship that needs some improvement. That was what I got out of it, and that's mostly what I have to say today.
Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Alexia, do you have anything to offer? No? It's a good meeting. Thank you for giving us the report that we received. It really helps us to understand what's happening at the grade level. And students, thank you for coming. I know you had to come. But this is an unusual situation. You have a board and you have a school district that like to work together. And if you have questions, answers, or anything, go to Alexia and she can bring it to us, because we're trying to make your district the best for you as much as we can. And Mrs. Betancourt, thank you for all the testing and everything you've done. Mr. Smith, I know this COVID has been hard on you. You have a numerous amount of hours that don't get clocked into us, but thank you for all your hard work. Mrs. Mendoza, it's going to be busy with the budget that's going on. And thank you, principals and teachers and staff. We really appreciate what you do, and sometimes we don't say it enough. But your students show us how good you are. So thank you very much, and have a safe night, and be careful of the wind. There are trees coming down all over. Thank you. May I have a motion to close? May I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it passes 5-0, and it's 7:20.